computer. Here we go. Okay, today is, what is today? Sunday, July 8th, and this is session number 4 of the 8th session storytelling workshop here in 2018. And today is dedicated to fairy tales. So I'll say a few words about fairy tales, and then usually we'd go off into groups of 2, and you'd have a chance to tell your fairy tale to one other person. With such a small group, we might share the fairy tales just together. But let's see how it goes. Well, just give me a sense of what stories you chose. Annapurna, what story did you choose?
So I went through Mother Hulda, the German fairy tale. Yeah. So that's what I thought I will retell. Yeah. Wonderful.
And Derek? Is my voice coming? Derek, can you hear me? Derek's picture is frozen. Krithika.
I chose a flowering tree, the Karnataka.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Janet?
Yeah, I did the Bear on the Mountain.
Bear on the Mountain. And Bonnie?
The 12 windows.
The 12 windows.
Yes.
Great. Hima. Good morning, Hima.
Good morning.
Okay, we are recording today's session. And what fairy tale did you choose to work on?
Truly speaking, I didn't do any workout.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
That's okay. I'm sure you have a favorite grandmother story that was told to you, that you have told to children. Does anything come to mind?
But I read this Brothers and Sisters.
Okay, so do you remember most of it?
Pardon?
Do you recall it? The brother and sister he turns into a rose bush and she turns into a rose.
Rose, and then they turn into a church and
crucifix, but I change it. In India, you can make it a temple and a statue of Shiva.
Okay.
And then finally, he turns into a duck pond, and she turns into a duck.
Duck, yeah.
Good. Because all the way this lady is chasing them, who's the cook, but she's really very mean.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And my favorite in the whole bunch is the girl at the pond. The girl who has the skin, and she takes off her skin and washes it in the pond, and then lays it on the grass, and it dries in the moonlight.
Okay.
So an aspect of fairy tales is that everything okay? Thank you again. The bear on the mountain, it's, I don't know if that's like a Panchatantra story or a fairy tale. It's sort of a halfway between.
Okay.
You know, these are all types of folk tales. Folk tales are stories that are passed down from generation to generation, and they have no individual author. So there are different types. And I think we use the term grandmother story in a similar way. There are many different types. One type is the animals are talking to each other. That's the Panchatantra type, or Aesop's fables, Jataka tales. And then another type is the fairy tale. And something special about the Western fairy tale. They came into existence just after the worship of local gods and goddesses was outlawed. You know, in Europe in the 700s, 800s, 900s, the local ruler said, I have converted to Christianity. You are also converting to Christianity. The temple for your goddess is no longer a temple for your goddess. It's now a temple for Jesus Christ. If you continue to worship this goddess, we will call you a witch. We will kill you. And that goddess, now we are calling her a demon. This is something that all of the major world religions have done when they have moved in. Judaism did it, Christianity, even Buddhism. But the local people, they love their local goddesses. Yeah. So what they did was with no plan, it just happened naturally, they recycled many of the stories about the local gods and goddesses into these harmless children's stories, which we call fairy tales. Okay. So many of the powers of the old woman who lives in the wood or the fairy godmother, they can be traced directly back to the powers of ancient goddesses. But now there's no claim to reality, there's no claim to historical existence. It's just a fairy tale. But there's a mythic undertone to the European stories. European and Slavic, that's the Russian and Polish, and Scandinavian, that's Denmark, Norway, Sweden. In that whole area, they developed these fairy tales with the mythic undertone. USA, we did not invent any fairy tales. We got them all from Europe. Let's see. In these stories, often something magical or supernatural happens without a scientific explanation, just from wishing. Often the formulaic opening for these stories is, in the time when wishing still did any good. In Tamil, people say just andakalatale, in those days. But in English or the European languages, people will often make a reference to wishing. Fairy tale is the land of wishes. Wishes can come true. So let's take a look at the stories you've chosen and see if there's any wishes involved. And most of all, the inner nature of a character is often represented by external objects in these stories. The external objects become metaphors for the inner self. And I might have mentioned this way of using metaphors is very popular in story work in general. And I'm even encouraging you to look at your life stories, which you told, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Look at your life story and see if any metaphors develop for it, for any aspect of it. And please, if you feel like it, either record a version of your life story, and we have a way now to put it on YouTube, or just write it down and maybe just send it to me personally. It can really focus on what do you love to do. Pretend the Hindu or the Times of India has called you and says, we want to do a feature article about you and your work. So if you had to help write that article, what is the title and what are the major steps along the way? I'd really recommend during the remaining 5 weeks of this workshop to develop your life story especially in terms of looking for metaphors and using it as a foundation off of which you can spin fantasy. When I teach creative writing or creative story making, which is a part of this course, the general method is start with reality, what you've actually experienced, and then spin off into fantasy. So if you do send me a written version of your life story, please let me know if this is private or if it can be shared with the group. And likewise, if you make a recording. Okay. So one of the stories that was chosen was Mother Hulda. Who told Mother Hulda?
Me, that's me.
In that story, what magical or supernatural representations of the inner nature of the children come to be? You know, I think the first girl gets a certain reward and the second girl gets could you tell about that?
Yeah, so basically the story is about good versus evil, and hardworking versus lazy. So the stepdaughter is hardworking, and she's a very nice girl. And then by fate, she falls into a well, and that's where the magic happens. So she goes into this beautiful land, and she does certain tasks on the way which were meant to be done that way, and therefore eventually is rewarded. And she comes back with her gold or treasure, and the daughter gets very greedy and she wants to do exactly the same thing. So she falls into the well and goes into the same beautiful land, but she doesn't do the tasks that were meant for her to do in the right way, so she isn't rewarded. So basically the message is that honesty and good nature and hardworking, those are the qualities, so that is the message. Yeah.
Great. Yes. So the younger girl, and for some reason in many of these stories, the younger sibling is the good one, and the older one is the bad one.
Yeah. So here it is the stepdaughter and the daughter. So the stepdaughter is the good one, like Cinderella. Yeah. Yeah.
The stepdaughter is the good one.
Yes.
But the younger one is the good one also.
Good one, the daughter, yes.
Somehow the convention has come up that the younger one is the good one. So, in real life, we are a combination of good and bad, each one of us. Right. But in these stories, the personality is split into two opposite parts, and one part is assigned to one character, one part is assigned to another character. So that is a metaphor in itself. The younger one is a metaphor for my good side. The older one is a metaphor for my bad side.
Yeah.
And so the good one falls into a well.
Right.
And that can be seen as what? A metaphor for falling into your unconscious, or somehow falling into a different realm, a different
facing
world.
Some challenges, or facing a challenge. You come across a challenge and see how you overcome it. And she does it, the way it is supposed to be handled.
Mm-hmm.
Manages it well.
First, some trees that have apples saying,
right.
Oh, please, will you pick my apples? These apples are so heavy. Please relieve me of this burden, because the apples are ripe. And the young girl, without thinking, goes and picks them and puts them in a pile. Then she comes to some outdoor ovens.
An oven, yeah.
And what do the loaves of bread say?
Right. So she goes to she passes by an oven where the bread loaves are ready to be taken out of the oven. So the bread loaves say, please take us out, else we will be burnt. So she, without thinking, takes the hot loaves from the oven and places it on the table. Mm-hmm. And then she goes her way. So shall I continue the story, Eric?
No, let's just take it step by step and let's jump around. See, later when her older sister comes, she is very self-centered. She's very selfish. So when the trees ask the older sister for help, the older sister says, "No, I'll get my hands dirty. I might scratch my hand on a rough spot. I can't help you." And when the loaves ask to be taken out of the oven, she says, "No, I might burn myself. I can't do it." So she is only concerned for herself. So when the younger one gets to the
old woman.
Old woman, it's a house in a clearing, and it's the old woman. And as I say, you can see her as a reincarnation of a goddess, a pre-Christian goddess. She says to the young girl, "Okay, you please come in and work." And the girl works very sincerely, right? Very carefully, very gently. But later, when the older sister comes, she's very rough. She sweeps up the dust, but the dust comes up and comes into the food. That's the older sister. So the older sister goes through the similar experiences, but does not have the right attitude.
Correct.
Okay, so after some time, the younger sister finishes cleaning, finishes cooking, and what does the old lady say to her?
So the stepdaughter, the good one, she works very honestly, and but she starts missing home. Although her stepmother and sister are bad, she starts missing her house, and she requests Mother Halda to send her back. And Mother Halda is very happy to do that. So she says, "Please walk out of the house." And when she does, gold flakes start showering on her. And she has a sack with her. Mother Halda would have given her a sack. And all the flakes fall in. She has a bag full of gold now. And that's how she's sent back to her house.
And you can change it if you like. You can make it flowers. You can make it fruits. You can make it anything that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, and we forgot one thing. One task of the girl was to fluff the mattress. See, in those days, mattresses and pillows were made out of goose feathers.
Feathers.
It's called down, goose down. And one of the tasks for the girl was to fluff the mattress or the pillow. And when that happens, naturally 1 or 2 feathers will come out of the sheet. Yeah. So the narrator says very simply, "Oh yes, some white feathers came out, and when they come down, that's what causes snow in the world."
Snow in the world, yeah.
So that's what gives you a hint that this is no ordinary old lady in the forest. She's something bigger than that. Yeah. And plus, she has the power to make things fall off the roof.
Yes.
Okay, so the younger sister goes back home and says, "Mother, sisters, look, I got this beautiful gold. Isn't it wonderful?" And the older sister says, "What? You little thing? If you could get that much gold, I can get twice as much gold. I'm twice as big as you. I'm twice as old as you. I'm twice as smart as you. I should get twice as much gold." So the younger sister shows her how to fall down into the well, and the older one goes. She goes to the trees. She goes to the ovens. And when she gets to the old woman's home, she bangs on the door. She says, "Hey, I'm here. I want to work. I want to get my prize." And the old woman, lets her in and says, "Okay, dear, that's what we need to do." And as I say, the older sister, she went through the motions, but she was looking at the time, and she was doing it in a rough way.
Yes.
So then finally, when the time was up, the old woman said, "Okay, it's time for you to go now." But the older sister said, "I am not moving until I get my payment, my reward." So the old lady says, "All right, you're going to get it." And she walks out the door, and what happens?
So she walks out, and then, from the roof, she has dirt, tar, and poop falling all over her. So she's like really dirty and smelly, and that's how she has to go back home.
Yeah, so she runs home crying, and the way the formulaic ending here is that they tried to wash her, but they're still washing her today. as we
Even today,
speak,
yeah.
even today. So see, these fairy tales have formulaic entries and exits. The entry is something like once upon a time when wishing still did any good. The exit is they lived happily ever after, or I went to the wedding and they gave me this sari, or they're still washing her, but they still can't clean her up even today. So this is a link back to the real world. Now again, you can change the reward. You can change the punishment.
So Eric, yeah. So there is a Maharashtrian folk tale. I don't know if anybody's read it, from Tulika Books. It's called Ekki and Duki. So it's again a very similar story where Ekki has one hair on her head and Duki has two hairs. And Ekki goes into the forest and she meets a cow. She treats the cow well. She meets a wilted bush. She waters the plant. And she meets an old lady who rewards her with a head full of hair. So she comes back to the village and suddenly the sister with two hair is now jealous because her younger sister has like a head full of hair. So she goes through the same process, goes into the forest but kicks the cow and doesn't water the plant, and then goes to the old lady's house and she's given some special powder to wash her hair, and when she comes out she loses the two hair that she already had. So she goes back to the village with absolutely no hair at all. So I found striking similarities between these two stories.
Absolutely. This is a kind of folk tale or fairy tale that appears in many cultures.
Right.
And part of the academic discipline of folklore, which I'm trained in, is we try to trace how a story traveled from one place to another, often with military invasions and colonializations and economic travel. The missionaries come, and also the folktales come. But with this story, it seems it's popped up in different places independently. Or with this motif of the bad one gets a bad reward, and the good one gets a good reward. So that motif, we call it a story element or motif, it seems to be an archetypal motif, meaning it's typical around the world. It's a universal in different cultures. So yes, you have it there too.
Yeah.
Now, I feel uncomfortable by saying it's tar falls on her, because that makes a person black. And, in stories, sometimes there's this color symbolism where value judgments are placed on different colors. So I don't feel comfortable with this idea of equating black with bad. It may be part of the brainwashing that was brought by European colonialists. So I will change it to lizards fell on her, or snakes, or poop. I think I added poop in there, which brings in the element of smell, because smell is important here. So as I say, if you recognize something in a story that you're not comfortable with, please change it.
Okay.
Modify it. In some cases, this is a small modification. In other cases, you have to make a bigger modification, or you just decide, I'm not going to tell this story because it doesn't go along with my worldview. But in this case, only minor ones are needed. Okay, so any questions or comments, anybody about this fairy tale?
You're right that the motif of the bad one versus the good one. There's a lot of stories out there that sort of tend to have a background of a bunch of tasks that one person does well and the other person doesn't, and it's not just two girls. You can even see it in I don't know, The Three Little Pigs. It sort of revolves around the same idea a little bit.
With Three Little Pigs, we really get a mixed message.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, the girl is acting badly. You know, she's going places where she's not invited. She's eating people's food that she was not invited.
Goldilocks. Three pigs.
That's Goldilocks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So Goldilocks, she does all these selfish things, but she's adventurous. She's curious, and she sees new things. So we feel mixed about Goldilocks. That, you know, she shouldn't have gone that far, but it's good that she was adventurous. And what was the other story? The one that you just mentioned before, Goldilocks?
Three Little Pigs.
Pigs. Okay, so in that one, the first two pigs were, they worked hard, but they did not work smart.
Yeah.
They used materials that were not strong.
Right.
So again, the first two pigs are not really bad. It's implied they're a little lazy, but they're not even lazy. They're just not clever. These stories.
No, I think in one version, it sort of seems like they're lazy because they say that the three pigs started walking to find materials to build their house with, and when they reached the straw, the first one was like, "No, I'm just gonna like settle here and build out of what's here." Then the other two continue to walk, and then they find the sticks, and the other one says, "Okay, I can't walk any further. I'll build my house out of this." It's the third one that continues walking, saying that, "No, I won't settle for these."
Okay, so
And
depending
that's
on
one version somewhere.
yeah, there are different versions. And you, again, as the teller, you can choose if you want to stress the virtue of hard work, or if you want to stress the virtue of smart work. You know, there's that saying, we have to work hard, but we also have to work smart. And to me, what I really like about Three Little Pigs is it brings out the value of working smart. If you work hard, but you're not using the right tool, you're not using the right materials, it's going to be a problem. Okay, so yes.
I think this has a similarity with, as you said, Cinderella.
Yeah.
Because they also have the stepsisters and they are cunning and greedy because they want to go to the prince and become princess. But it is Cinderella that hard work and she's in the right place in the right time, and so finally she's the one who gets married.
And these stories do tend to reward the good one at the end. You know, in real life, that doesn't always happen, but these stories are teaching a value system and a hope that the good will be rewarded and the bad will be punished. We have to operate on that hope, especially when we're socializing and educating young people. We have to give them, a model, and even if that model doesn't always work out that way, it's the way we hope they believe. Okay. Any other thoughts about this kind of story? This story in particular, or the type of story where one character is good, one character is bad? You know, another way to do it is to first have the character be bad, and then she learns a lesson. And then she turns over a new leaf, to use a metaphor, and she becomes good. Yes, that's right. That's another story that was there, where first the lady is self-centered, greedy, arrogant, and what teaches her a lesson in that story?
Kashmir comes disguised as a minstrel and is her. So she has to do all the work with kitchen maid and set up the earthen pots. And then she tries to do the yarn, the spindle, and three baskets with the gloves. but she was really placed and finally she's humbled down. I thought it is similar taking to
Yes.
Shakespeare.
Yes, yes. So in this story, there's a woman who, her father wants her to marry somebody, but she says none of these men are good enough for me. It's like the 12 windows. Someone else is doing the 12 windows. So, and she even makes fun of one of the applicants because he has a long beard. So her father gets angry and he says, tomorrow you'll marry the first man I see. And it so happens that the same man with the long beard, he's really a prince. But the next morning, I think he communicates with the father because the husband and the father want to teach the woman a lesson. The story, it's not one of my favorite stories because it seems to be a little against women. You know, it's treating a woman as a greedy figure. What happens? Oh, so in the morning the prince comes, but now he's dressed as a beggar, minstrel or beggar. And the girl does not recognize him from the day before. So she has to marry him and live in a small hut. And she has to make some crafts which get destroyed anyway. And then finally at the end, the prince says, okay, I'm really a prince, I'm really wealthy. But by that time, she has, somehow she has realized that she should not have been so mean at the beginning. Another great example, my favorite example of this good and bad, first bad, then good, is the Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Everyone know that story? Yeah. Good morning, Sairenu. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm better.
Good. I think please go on mute because I think we get a little interference sound from your side. Yes. So when you're going to speak, just unmute yourself. Yes. In the Christmas Carol, you know, and some of these stories, like Taming of the Shrew, Christmas Carol, it might be based on a folk tale. You have to really study it and find out where did the author get that story. But A Christmas Carol is a very greedy man who is he won't even let his employee have a day off on Christmas or Christmas Eve. And then the greedy man goes home and 3 ghosts visit him. But they might be only his dream. We never find out. But they show the past, the present, and the future. And by the time he's seen his past, present, and future, when he wakes up, he's so glad that it was only a dream and now I have a second chance. And he sends some special food to his employee because his employee, he has a son who is ill. And in the dream, the son died because the son didn't get enough good food. So now when the man wakes up, he makes sure that the good food is sent to his employee's son. And he's so joyous, the greedy man is, that he has a second chance to save himself and to save others.
The slave was put up by the narrow circle.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas tree was
Mm-hmm. So again, this is different from real life. In real life, each one of us has a mix of good and bad, but these stories will project good onto one side, bad onto the other side, and then put these characters into play with each other. And this is something, you know, humans like to do. We like to think about good and evil, that there is good and evil. When we talk about evil, that is bringing in a religious aspect, you know, because if someone is acting badly, you know, we'll even imply, you know, what has gotten into you? Have you been possessed by a devil? And some people actually believe it, right? They'll call Sami, they'll have an exorcism. So it is one explanation for bad behavior. The psychological approach is that it's just that there's a part of us that is damaged, and that damaged part will act in a greedy or angry way. That's the psychological explanation. The more popular religious explanation is the devil's gotten into her. So you can choose your worldview. Okay, shall we go on to the 12 windows? You did the 12 windows. Okay, and that, maybe tilt the screen so it shows the two people. Yes. So all four of you. Good. Okay, so the 12 windows, again, there's a young lady who she does not want to get married because, see, she's the daughter of the king, and she will inherit the land. And why would she want a husband to come to marry into the family and become the boss, and then she is just under her husband? So she says, Father, no need. But he wants grandchildren. So they decide upon a contest. If they can find a man who is smarter than her, or at least as smart, because she also says all these men are stupid. They're not so smart. They're bullies, but they're not so smart. So they decide that if they can find a man who's at least as smart as her, she will agree to marry him. And as the story starts, there are 99 posts outside the castle, each one with the head of a man who has failed in the task. So the punishment is if a man fails in the contest, off with his head. And actually there were 3 brothers, and the 2 older brothers was 98, 99, and now it's down to the last brother, who is the youngest brother. And this may sound gruesome, but a psychological reading of cutting off someone's head in a fairy tale is that they were too proud, they were too rigid, so this is a way to cut them down to size. It's not, it should not be taken as real violence. We hope that children do not follow literally the violence in these stories. We hope they understand this is story violence and not to be followed. There's a debate about this, and some parents and some teachers will change it to make it less violent. But some psychologists say there has to be that violent punishment for bad behavior to make it vivid for the child, to make it memorable. But it's up to you. Okay, so let's see, what is the contest?
So she has this tower room in her castle, 12 windows, and she can see these windows, and each window makes the vision clearer than any normal human being. By the time she reaches the 12th window, nothing could be kept a secret from her. She could see anything underneath the earth or above the earth over her kingdom. So any man who wants to beat her has to hide from one cold day. And 97 miserably failed and their head stuck to the post.
So it's like magical glasses, or not magical, but like a superpower glasses that at the second window she can see behind a tree. The third window she can see underwater. The fourth window you can see underneath the earth. Progressively, until by the 12th window, really, one can see everything. And so the man has to hide from her, and she can't find him. So on the way, when the young one was coming to this place, he met 2 animals. First, the bird. Yes, he met a bird, raven. And he did not, he was going to, with the bow and arrow, he was going to shoot and cook and eat the raven. But the bird said, please don't eat me, I'll help you. And I think likewise with the fish. Yeah. So we learn that the young man is kind, he's compassionate. Okay, so he hears the mission. The princess tells him, and I think he asked for 2 extra days. He asked for 3 days. Ah.
3 chances.
Okay, so oh, you should come off. You're still on mute. Let's see if we can. Oh, but it will have an echo if we're both. Okay, so you have to be on mute until I stop talking. Okay, so he goes out, and first he goes to the lake, and he finds that fish, and the fish swallows him. Right? He goes into the fish, but by the 2nd or 3rd window, the young lady sees him. So they take him out, and then what's the next one?
The raven tells him to hide inside an egg.
Oh yes, the bird hides him in a bird egg up on a tree. Again, they find it. Oh, and there's a 3rd animal, a fox. Yeah. So when he gets to the fox, you have to mute again. I'm sorry. Yes. The fox says, this is a difficult task, but I know what to do. So the fox says to the young man, jump up and make a flip. And the man jumps and makes a flip. When he lands, he is only a flea, a little bug. And the fox jumps up, and when he lands, he is dressed as an animal trainer. So they go to the village, and it is a circus act where they stretch a string across, and the flea, excuse me, the flea walks on the string, and it's a novelty circus act. So a big crowd comes, and they're watching this little flea. It's very interesting. And even someone tells the princess about it. So she comes out of her castle, comes into town, they make space for her, they give her a nice big chair, and she sees the flea walking and jumping and balancing, and she gives a payment, and then when she gets up and turns to go home, what happens?
The animal trainer tells that
advises the young man to flee now, to run behind her and climb up onto her braid and hide beneath the braid of her hair until she tries to search him through the window. And later, when she doesn't find him through all the 12 windows and she starts getting nervous that this young man is actually smarter than her, that time the flea comes out of her braid, then lands on the ground, jumps up, does a flip in the midair, and then becomes the handsome young man once again. So she has to agree that he has finally outsmarted her, outwitted her, and could hide from her. And so she happily marries him actually. She's glad.
Yeah, that's the thing. She ends up liking him.
Yes.
Because she sees he's clever, he was polite. She sees that he was communicating well with the animals. So she's satisfied. Hema, did you want to say something about that, or you were just confirming?
I felt this young man, he has a communication with the princess that he, in the story, there was no such narration that the men tried to talk to this princess. So this fellow made an impression how good he is and all. So that way people can make a better communication to make the other person understand. That was there, the message there.
Mm-hmm. To make a personal connection.
Yeah.
That's very important in the business world. You have to know when to make a phone call and when not to. When to make a phone call, when to send an email, when to make it personal, when to give some distance. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts about this story? Well,
Yeah, well, I thought people who could look all over the world failed to look at themselves.
Yes, that's a big thing. It hides behind her braid. And so that gives us a message that, it's like physician heal thyself. And, you're looking at problems in other people, but you don't see problems in yourself. So it's teaching people to be self-aware as much as possible. So these stories really are giving suggestions about timeless matters regarding soft skills, interpersonal skills, relationship skills. Okay, what other stories did people choose? Oh, brother and sister. Did someone choose brother and sister? Well, Hema, we were just talking about it. Renu, what story did you choose? Renu, you have to come off unmute.
Yeah. I like the 12 windows as well as the brother and sister.
Okay. Do you have any additional thoughts about the 12 windows story?
No, that was what impressed me. Like she was not aware of her own back. That was what impressed me about the story. Yes, the brother and sister. Yeah, maybe I'm quite a sentimentalist person. I'm a single child in my house. Maybe that is why I like the brother and sister thing better than others.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Okay, because the sister was a single child, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me begin to tell it, and then you'll jump in. This is my daughter's favorite story. When I had a period of about 6 months when I was allowed to tell our daughter bedtime stories, because my style of storytelling is I get people excited. You know, I play one character, and then the person plays the other character. We act it out. So it was not helping my daughter go to sleep. It was keeping her up, and she would stay up for hours afterwards. And even now, she'll read deep into the night if she's allowed. So for better or for worse, I think I've contributed to my daughter being a night owl, and someone who likes to listen to and tell and read stories late into the night. So after about 6 months, my wife said, Eric, I'm taking back the the bedtime storytelling task, because our daughter's not going to sleep. But this was our daughter's favorite one. Okay, so it begins where there's a lady who has a baby boy, and she's walking through the forest, and she's carrying the baby boy in a cloth, and she feels a little tired. So she sits down. She thinks, no harm, I'll just take a rest. Before you know it, she falls asleep. And two birds come flying by, a mother and father bird, and they say to each other, oh, look, that little baby boy. We've always wanted a little baby boy, and so let's take him. So they come down, and they pick up the cloth with the baby inside, and they take him up into a tree. When the mother wakes up, the human mother, she feels that the baby is not there anymore, and can imagine she's she's horrified. Baby, where are you? And she looks every place to see if he's crawled someplace. She can't find him. She can't find the cloth. So she's thinking, what would you think? You think maybe a wolf took it away, something. How horrible. So she feels so guilty and so upset. So she just keeps looking, and she continued to look for the next 3 years. Every day she continued to look, but she couldn't find. But what did happen was the birds took the baby and put it up a tree, up in a nest. And soon after that, a man came by, a man who lived in that forest, and he heard up in a tree, wah, wah, wah. So he climbed up the tree, and he saw a human baby in the nest. So he thought to himself, well, you know, I have one daughter at home. My wife has passed away. Let me take this human boy and I'll raise him as my adopted son. So with one hand, he takes the baby. With the other hand, he carefully climbs down the tree and he goes home and shows the baby boy to his daughter. And his daughter was happy. You know, sometimes there's sibling rivalry, but in this case, she was happy to have a little baby brother. And so they grew up, but then the twist comes, the crisis comes. What happened? What did the cook say to the older sister one day? Rainer.
Yeah. She says, "Let us cook the boy."
So now you see, all of us listening, it's like we feel we are the sister, and the cook has said, "We're going to cook your older brother." So I responded like the sister, right? I said, yeah. And you know, maybe each one of you did not make a face like that, but each one of you would have a similar reaction because the cook said, "We're going to cook your brother." Okay, so the sister was shocked, and what did she do?
She took him and ran away, called him and ran away out of the house. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
And then?
So and then she kept turning into things when I suppose she's a witch, the cook was.
She is a witch, yes. She has magical powers, but somehow the boy and the girl also have magical powers. So she sees them running away through, I guess, the kitchen window, and she has an assistant, a man, who's like assisting her. And she says to him, "Follow those two and bring them back, dead or alive." So the boy and the girl see the man coming, and they stop running because they realize that they can't outrun him. He's going to catch up. And the older sister says to her younger brother, "Okay, you never leave me, and I'll never leave you." And the brother says, "Don't worry, I'll never leave you." Then she says, "Okay, you turn into a rose bush, and I will turn into a rose." And they do. And the man comes, he doesn't see the boy or the girl, but he sees a beautiful rose bush. And he tries to pick the rose, but he gets cut on the thorn. He goes back to the cook and says, "Cook, I couldn't find, I just saw a rose bush." She said, "You foolish fellow. Everyone knows the rose bush was the boy and the rose was the girl. Go again." So then the boy and the girl had turned back to each other, and this time again they did that contract. It is that exchange, that expression of love and devotion and loyalty that somehow gives them the power to be invisible to wickedness, to the destructive element. So you never leave me, no, I'll never leave you. And what do they turn into the second time? A church and a crucifix, or a temple and Shiva, or whatever religious system you want, the religious house and the special object of worship. And the man doesn't see the children, but he sees a nice temple, and he thinks, "Oh, I never saw this temple before. Interesting." He goes in, he prays, he comes back, and he says to the cook, "Cook, I couldn't find them, but I saw such a wonderful temple, and I never knew there was a temple." This time she's just furious. "You idiot! You couldn't see that was the boy and the girl? Okay, I'm going to go and do it myself." So she goes. The boy and the girl have turned back into themselves, but they see the cook coming. One last time, they say, well, you'll never leave me, I'll never leave you. And the girl, see, each time it's the girl, the older sister. In this case, the older child is also good. And the older child, she's the one who has all the ideas, because her brother is just a child, younger. So the older one says, you turn into a duck pond, and I'll turn into a duck. And they do. But this time, when the cook comes, she recognizes it. She sees through the illusion. And she kneels down to drink the water, and then she's planning to get the duck. But at the moment she kneels down to drink, the duck comes and pulls her down into the water, and the cook has to drown. So that's a big relief. And then as a special added wonderful thing, as the brother and sister are walking home, they come upon the original mother of the boy who was lost. And I told you, for 3 years, every day she went to the forest to look for her baby boy. And now when the brother and sister see that lady, and the lady sees the boy, she seems to recognize the boy a little bit. And her baby had a little birthmark, a little mole behind his ear. So she says to the boy, my child, would you show me behind your ear? And because she said, I had a boy who I lost in the forest who had this birthmark. And he shows her, and it's there. And, mother, son. And they go back, and of course the mother and the father of the girl fall in love and live happily ever after. So Renu, any thoughts about the story?
Yeah, I thought maybe the girl has witch origins. Or, she cannot put on a statement like, I'm going to cook your brother, and the cook won't be, so forthcoming if the girl hadn't witch origins.
Well,
Maybe
both the cook and the young girl, you can call them witch origins, or you could call them goddess origins, because this ability to shapeshift is a classic quality of ancient gods and goddesses. As I say, these stories came into existence when people could no longer worship their ancient goddesses, but the same ideas came into these stories. And in the case of the brother and sister, or the sister, she was able to use this shape-shifting power for the sake of love and protection. But the cook was very familiar with these things. So she also probably had similar powers.
Yeah. But still, yes, she was quite affectionate towards a human boy who presumably did not have the powers. That was astonishing.
Who was
really
affectionate?
The sister wasn't she?
Uh-huh.
In spite of her, naturally higher powers than the human boy, she had the affection.
Well, the sister was also human, but she had these special powers.
Powers, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't
Well, Yes.
Didn't the boy also turn himself into things? Wasn't you turn into a rose bush, I turn into a rose. You turn into a church, I turn into
I don't know. As I remember it, the girl is telling. But, maybe on the page it says differently. But, when you read a story and make it your
My
own.
question is, did she turn herself in, did she turn both herself and the boy, or did she say, okay, I'll do this and you do that? That was my question.
As I tell it, she says, you turn into a rose bush and I'll turn into a rose. So it's her idea. You just have to find a way to say it that makes a little bit of sense. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. But you have to find a way to say it that does not cause a distraction, does not cause your listener to think about it too much. But it just, psychologically, it sounds okay. see, the way I have internalized the story, the older sister is the leader. So she has the idea, she tells him what to do, and she has the ability, so it's all her thing, and he is sort of the silent junior partner in the project. But, you know, I hate to break it to you all, this story did not really happen. It's just an imaginary pretend story. So you have to tell it in a way that you know, that goes smoothly. You do not want your listeners to ask too many questions. So you just have to find a way that follows an internal logic of the story. This story has very striking opposite female characters. Of course, the cook is really bad. The older sister is very good. The mother is a mix. I mean, she's mostly good, and she's very devoted that she looks for her son, you know, every day. But she did fall asleep in a forest. That is it's not responsible behavior, you know? If you're carrying a baby through a forest and you fall asleep, that's tempting fate. There was something a little bit missing there. She was not strong, she was not determined, she was a little bit negligent. So fortunately, in the story, we begin with this mother who's good but not fully awake. Then we go to a really bad female mother figure who gets destroyed, and then the good mother and the good sister come back into dominance. It's kind of an alternation. Okay, any final thoughts about that story? What other stories? A flowering tree. Who chose a flowering tree? Okay, let me set it up, and then you can take over. So, you know, I often think in India that you don't have the same type of fairy tales as in the West. Because in India, this thing of ancient goddesses being outlawed, it did not happen very much. So people are still worshiping, and but this is a story that it has magical transformations, but no gods. So I think it's a fairy tale. Renu, I think again, go on mute, if you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Some reason a little sound was coming. It comes from Renu. Okay, so let's see, how does it begin? There are two sisters, right?
Yeah.
The older sister and the younger sister, and I think it's the older sister who says to the younger sister, I have a special ability. If you pour water on me, I will turn into a tree, and as I visualize it, little white flowers will come out of my fingers. You can pick the flowers. Be very gentle. Don't hurt the branches. You can pick them and then pour water on me again. We'll go to town, we'll sell the flowers, we'll get some money, and we'll give some money to mother, because their father is not on the scene, and they're a very poor family. So the younger sister pours the water, picks the flowers, pours the water, they go to town, they sell, they get the money, maybe they buy vegetables, they bring the vegetables for their mother. The mother's very happy. And this happens daily, right? So the mother's happy, but also she wants to know. Finally, she says to her daughters, how are you getting this money? Are you stealing it? What's going on? So the older daughter says, Mother, I'll tell you, but if you tell me, you'll beat me. You won't believe me. You'll call me a liar. But the mother says, come on, just tell me the truth. So the daughter says, I can turn into a tree and make flowers. What? So they go outside and they do it. They demonstrate it. And it's true. The mother is amazed. So this goes on, and they even get enough money now to buy some paint to paint their house. And the neighbors see. The neighbors begin to talk. Say, how can this lady and her two daughters have enough money to make a nice house? They're not paying any taxes. We'll tell the king. The king should know. They're not paying any taxes, but they have all this money. So they report, and the king's son comes to investigate. He hides behind a tree, and he sees the older daughter turning into a tree, and he falls in love with her because she's beautiful, and also because she has a special power. He's entranced. He goes back to his father. He says, I have found the woman I want to marry. Father says, who? And he says, it's a girl who lives in the village. Father says, what? She's just a peasant. You can't marry a peasant. The son says, no, she's special. I've made my decision. So they get married, and that night, they're sleeping on a bed, and the husband says, our bed is very hard. Can you make some flower petals so we can sleep on the flower petals? So she says, okay, you'll have to pour water on me. And then when you're done, pour water again. So he does it. They pick the flowers. They sleep on the flowers. In the morning, they throw the flowers out the window, and they make a pile. And this happens every day for a number of days. The husband has a younger sister who sees this pile of flower petals, and she asks her older brother, where are you getting these flowers? And he says, it's sort of a secret, but my wife, your sister-in-law, she can make flowers out of her fingers. So his younger sister says, I want to see, and I want all my friends to see. Have your wife come to the garden, and we'll pour water on her, and we'll get the flowers. So the husband goes to his wife, and what does he say to his wife?
He says he asks her to go with his sister, but she's very hesitant actually, because she's the more people who learn of her secret, the more hesitant she gets, because she doesn't really want it to become public.
She says, dear, this is something I don't like to show it off in public. It's a little dangerous for me. If the branches get broken, it can hurt me. It's not something I want to show off sort of as a show. But he says, oh, come on, please. You're my wife. Your sister-in-law has made a request. Please do it. Yeah, so the wife feels she has no choice. So she goes, and what happens?
The young girls, they all start fighting over the flowers, and they start pulling at her branches, and they start breaking them off.
And then the rain comes. The rain comes.
So
they all run away, and the rain turns her back into a human, but now she is broken. No arms, no legs, and she tries to roll up the hill to get back to the palace, but she falls into a ditch. She falls down. She's there. So the husband, it's evening. His wife has not come back. He asks his younger sister, what happened? Younger sister says, well, we left her there. And they go and search, but they can't find her. So the husband, he just gets depressed. And as the days go on, 1 day, 2 days, he refuses to eat. He refuses to brush his hair. He refuses to cut his hair. He won't cut his fingernails. It goes on for some time. And he looks like a wild animal. And finally he just wanders off into the forest. Lost. In the meantime, the wife does manage to roll up out of the ditch, and she rolls to the house of her husband's older sister. The husband had a younger sister and an older sister. So the older sister looks out of her window and sees this kind of clump lying in the road, but she sees the face and she recognizes this as her sister-in-law. So she has her workers come down and bring her up and wash her and put her in a bed, give new clothing, but the wife cannot speak. So she's just lying in bed. Soon after, somehow, because it's a fairy tale, the husband also finds his way to his older sister's house. And he stands in the road, and she recognizes it as her brother, even though her hair is all here. And again, she has him brought up and washed and clothed, and he is put in the same room. The wife is in bed, and he is there, and the husband and wife see each other. And they are both happy to see each other. They can't speak. Neither of them can speak. But they're happy to see each other. So after some time, the wife manages to say, pour water on me and try to fix my branches. So he does it, and the flowers grow, and once things are broken, you can't unbreak them. But at least you can straighten them out and try to fix things. And that's what he did. And then he poured water again. And when she came back as a human, she was okay. She had her arms and legs back. So it's and they could both talk again, right? So it's a happy ending. So so Krithika, what were some thoughts you had about this story?
Actually, it's the concept of a secret that appealed to me. Like the more the secret became public, there's just so many changes that happened in her life with each time she told the secret. Because the first time when it was just the sister, they were getting a little money. Then after they told the mother, then they started selling more flowers, and suddenly they grew rich. And the next time the secret became public, the prince wanted to marry her. The next time the secret became public, the younger sister somehow damaged her. So each time the secret came out, either intentionally or unintentionally, some change happened in her life. I can't hear you.
Yeah, so it's about secrets and when to keep a secret, when to share a secret. To me, the story is also about family obligations. She feels an obligation to follow her husband's request and follow the sister-in-law's request, even though she has a feeling that this is not a good idea. Was anybody really angry at the younger sister and her friends? Yeah, but what can you do? They're children.
Yeah, in the beginning I was, but they're kids.
They're kids.
In the beginning I was.
It's really it's the husband's fault.
Yeah.
So he should have defended his wife.
Or he shouldn't have left them unsupervised.
He should have gone with them. He should have been there. He could have invited his sister in and done it just for his sister. But he put his wife in a vulnerable position. But he suffered. He got what he deserved. He had a long period of hopelessness. Often a quality of these types of stories is that there's a long period of total despair, hopelessness, where all seems lost. But then somehow at the end there's a restoration. Okay. So we never find out why the girl had those powers, whether it was given by a goddess or something else, but we don't care. We forget about that. If you get involved in a story, as I say, you get involved with the internal workings of the story, and you suspend your need for rational explanations. Okay, any other thoughts about that story?
Yeah, I thought this story had the moral that one shouldn't really hurt the plants.
Okay.
To teach that, when the children hear this story, maybe they would personify every plant and tree, and maybe they would stop really hurting it, pulling it, and all that.
Excellent. Yes, if we personify a tree, that means we start with a tree and pretend it has human qualities. But in this case, she started as a human and became a tree or became a plant. Yes, so it is an example of personification, and it certainly could be used to raise consciousness, raise awareness, raise sensitivity, that if we hurt a plant, it's like hurting a human being.
In India, we do deify the trees.
Yeah.
Yes, and even in the newspapers. That's one thing a foreigner notices immediately, that there are newspaper articles about trees. You know, that a famous old tree has been injured or has fallen or they're trying to fix it. In the USA, trees don't get in the papers like this. Of course not. We don't pay attention to trees. But in India, people are very sentimental. Yes.
Yeah.
That's also significance to the different trees. Mustn't cut down the tree.
The trees and the tulasi plant, the holy baby.
Uh-huh. Did anyone work with that Fish Brother story? Did anyone read it? That's an example of how I think in many Tamil or Indian grandmother stories, a tree is personified, does have human voice and consciousness, and often has been witness to a crime. And so the people of the village, the panchayat, they go to the tree and ask the tree what happened. And that's what happens in that Fish Brother story, because his brothers had killed him because he had cut the foot of their sister. And he had cut the foot of their sister because his sister had given him some bad food. Yes.
Yes.
So they went to him because they needed his flowers. The sister was getting married. They needed the flowers, but when they took the flowers off of him and put them on the sister, they immediately wilted. And this is another example of an external symbolic manifestation of an internal personality issue, where internally the sister had been negligent. She had not warned the Fish Brother that she was giving him mud with a little rice on the outside. So she really had behaved badly. So that bad behavior was manifested in the wilting of the flowers. And this sort of thing comes up in legends, even mythology. I think in Madurai, with the different Tamil sangams, people would throw pieces of writing on paper or on palm leaf. They would throw it onto the pond, and good literature would stay up, bad literature would go down. It's a legend. In America, when they were accusing people of being witches, they would put women underwater, and they believed that good people would survive and bad people would drown. Many times a test is given, leaving it sort of up to nature, but with the idea that there's a divine intelligence, and that divine intelligence will give a good result for the good people and a bad result for the bad people. Any other examples of that in legends or mythology? See if you think of some later.
There is one Tamil story where a tree and a linga, they stand as the witnesses to a marriage.
Ooh.
And when the husband says, no, I didn't commit this marriage, then the tree and the linga come to his place and stand witness that the marriage happened. It is a mythological story in Madurai.
Mm-hmm.
It happened, I think, in Tiruvottur near Chennai.
Mm-hmm.
where a tree as well as a linga, they stood as witnesses to the marriage. Then the husband went back to Madurai and said, no, I hadn't married the girl. Then the tree and the linga came there, and yeah, we were witnesses, he married that girl. They said, it's a mythological story. Yeah.
So it's a belief that there is a divine intelligence in everything. This is called animism, that the entire universe is animated with a divine spirit, intelligence, again, that will punish the bad and reward the good. We'll come a little closer. Yeah.
The story of Shakuntala, where also she had no one to say that.
And how did they prove that the marriage happened?
A fish will be caught by a fisherman, and he'll find the royal ring inside the fish belly, and then he'll be to Shashanta. Yes, would have actually sent a punishment that he forget past. Forget about marriage.
Yes.
And when he sees the royal took the ring, he started remembering that he was married. Yes. I mentioned one thing about plants being divine creatures in mythology. There is this Kalpa Vriksha. So it is this infinite giver. So anybody makes a wish, Kalpa Vriksha, it's a tree. Whatever you wish for, it will give you. It's a wish fulfilling tree. So if you are a good heart and your intention is pure, it will fulfill your wish. That is the Kalpa Vriksha.
A wishing tree, a wishing well.
The first story was Shakuntala.
They say all these four gods are present in the different parts of this cow. So when they worship cow and you wish for something, it fulfills the wish. Even that's special cow. It's called Kamadeva.
Well, I did my field work for my PhD with tribal people of the Kanikaran tribe in far southern Tamil Nadu, near the Kerala border, near Pechiparai. And one day when they were taking me on a walk in the forest, many of the young people spoke English because they had gone to a Catholic school. And the village was on the side of a forest. It was not in the forest. And, they were very modernized. They had electricity. They had FM radio. Yeah. But anyway, so they took me on a walk in the forest one day. And at one point they showed me there were two big boulders, two huge stones next to each other. And they said, this is where the two boulders crushed the wicked man. And the story was that a man had been chasing an udumbu. Udumbu is, the big lizard, which they hunt for food. And, that's a part of their culture. But this particular man, he was a wicked man. He was a bad man. I don't know why, but somehow he was bad. So when he was chasing the udumbu went between the two boulders, and the two boulders came together and crushed the man. So this is communicating that they feel that the divine intelligence is in the udumbu and in the boulders, in everything. And that this will function to punish bad people. Some people say that when you're raising a child, you must tell her that God exists, God is there, because that will convince the child to act good, to be good. Now, I don't know about that, but I think we do need to convince young people that somehow good behavior will be rewarded and bad behavior will be punished, whether it's God or fate or something.
Some form of governance.
Some
Some form of higher governance.
something, yes. You can, in psychological terms, you can even say that when we do good, we know we've done good, and we will reward ourselves. We will love ourselves. We will respect ourselves. We will gravitate towards other people who will also be respectful. So we will get a reward in those terms, just because of our own self-respect. That may be a little complicated to explain to a child, but certainly the idea that good will be rewarded is an essential part of what we teach. Okay, Renu, what story did you work on a story? Did you?
I did a story different from the 12 ones that you gave.
Tell us.
That was it was a Russian fairy tale from the northern areas where it is all snow. It was a bit wishful thinking, so scorching hot here. So I took a story where in the northern areas it was completely snow, and an old man who was living with his 3 daughters, and there was a big snowstorm, and all of them were suffering. And the old man said, it is because the Lord of the Winds is angry with us, and he wants us to send a wife. So he sends his eldest daughter to the Lord of the Winds, and he gives some instructions for her to follow. That she has to, she should not wait to tie her coat or take her shoes, and she has to be kind to a bird, and she has to follow all the instructions given by the Lord of the Winds. But the girl she disobeys her father, and she disobeys the Lord of the Winds, and the Lord of the Winds threw her into the snow and she froze to death. Same thing happened with the second girl also. And the old man sends the youngest daughter also. The youngest daughter follows his instructions perfectly, and she goes to the Lord of the Winds, and the Lord of the Winds asks her, why did you come? And when he asked the same question to the 2 daughters, 2 elder ones, they said, my father had sent me as your wife. But the youngest daughter says, I have come here to beg you to stop the storm so that my people will not perish. So that impressed the Lord of the Winds, but he gives the same instructions as he gave the other 2 daughters. She follows them perfectly, and then he takes her as his wife, and the snowstorm stops. That is the story. I have made it as a YouTube video, and I posted it also.
Oh, good. And I think I should apologize today. I have not given people a chance to tell the whole story by yourself. But please feel free to make a video. If you don't know how to make a video, ask me, ask Renu, and we'll show you how to send it and put it on YouTube if you want, or you can just send it to me, or each one of you can have a private meeting with me in person or by Zoom, and the last 3 weeks it will all be you giving performances. So if you want to tell your complete story, you certainly will get a chance. And really a good way to work on a story is to tell it from different points of view. As the narrator, from the point of view of one character, from the point of view of another character, from the point of view of all characters. If you do that, then when you go back and tell it from the narrator's point of view, you will easily be able to at times say, and this character said this, and this character said that, because you will have told the entire story from that other character's point of view. Okay, so that was a discussion about. I'm sorry that you didn't all get to tell your story, but Renu, so what kind of story can we call this? Is this a kind of a legend, or it's not a fairy tale,
Yeah.
and it's not quite mythology, but it's using mythical elements. What would we call this?
Yeah, it has some fairy tale elements. I was not telling the story completely. It has animals speaking and all that, and an old woman with people inside her ear and all that. It has some elements. I just stressed on the gist of the story.
Yes, yes. So what really attracted you to this story? What do you really love about it?
The perseverance I felt. The perseverance of the girl, and again the answer that even I didn't miss that even in my gist. The girl did not tell the Lord of the Winds that I have come here as your wife. She said, I have come here to beg you to stop the storm so that my people are saved. That was I felt that even the gods will be impressed by that selflessness.
That she's speaking on behalf of her people. And this idea, it's like a dream that she can speak to the wind and the wind will talk back to her.
The wind is actually a giant.
The wind is a giant?
Yeah, wind is a giant.
I actually saw the YouTube videos.
Good. Okay, so we'll watch that on YouTube and give more commentary about it.
Okay.
Good. Who else? Whose story have we not discussed? Did someone work on that story about the bear on the mountain? The bear on the mountain? The bear on the mountain. Here, tilt this a little bit so we can see it more. So the bear on the mountain. Let's see. How does it begin?
This bear is hiding in a cave.
Oh, you have to unmute. No, go ahead.
There is this bear there that is hiding in a cave in the Himalayan mountains, high in the Himalayan mountains. And he is very frightened of the king because he feels that the king wants to capture him and use the fur to make a rug. And so he is hiding there and nobody knows that he's there. But one day in his sleep, he's rudely woken up by screams. He can hear somebody screaming, he can hear. And he says, yes, this is a man's voice, no doubt. And he says, help me, I'm freezing. This is what he hears, and then he knows, he feels, oh, maybe he thinks, he says, maybe this is one of the men who are come looking for me. The king must have sent him to look for me, and now he's caught in the snowstorm. There was a snowstorm, and it was snowing very heavily all around him, and the whole place was white, visibility was very poor. And the first thought that came to him is that this man must have been coming to look for him. So he did not know what to do. He said, should I go and help him and save this man because he's going to die, or save myself, he said, because if I go out, then he will know where I'm living, and then he'll surely go and tell the king that I'm here.
Okay, so this story presents a series of decisions that characters have to make. The first decision is the bear has to decide, shall I just stay in bed in my cave and let that man die? Or shall I go out into the snowstorm and save that man, even though I know that man has probably come to find me and to tell the king where I live? It will be the death of me, or at least I'll lose my home, I'll have to be homeless, I'll have to run. So you can even, if you like, see, I was trained to never interrupt a story, to save all the discussion for the end. But once in a while, I like to stop in the middle and ask listeners, well, what would you have done if you were in that position? And some people will say, I would stay in bed. Other people would say, no, I would go and save the man. But so what happened? What did the bear decide?
He was very compassionate, actually, the bear. He said, no, I'll go and help this man. He decided to go out and help the man. So he goes out, and this man was in the snowstorm. He was not able to see very clearly, except for a few inches in front of him. And then he was shocked when he saw this big black bear in front of him. And then the bear calls him and he says, come with me, and he takes him to the cave. And so he was actually trying to save this man, and he was not quite thinking about himself or his safety. And he just took him to the cave, and then the man was feeling thirsty. He said, can I have some water, please? And then the bear says, no, we'll have to melt the snow. I have to, first of all, make a fire, melt the snow, and then I'll give it to you. So that's what he actually did. He made a fire, he took a cup of snow and held it above the fire, and made it into water and gave it to the man to drink. And then they went to sleep. And because it was already night, it was getting dark. That is one of the things also the bear was thinking about. He says, I can't wait, I have to decide fast because it's getting dark, and then we won't be able to see anything properly. And so he immediately comes out. And when they get up in the morning, then the bear tells him, see, I saved your life. And but you must do me a favor. Don't tell anybody that you saw me.
And what does the man say?
And he promises him that he will not tell anyone.
Okay.
And in that moment, he was very grateful and so thankful. The bear had and saved his life. So he says, no, I will not tell anyone, and that's a promise, he says.
Okay. So this is the second turning point. The man says, I promise, I give my word, I will not tell anyone.
That I even saw you. And leave alone saving my life, I will not even tell anyone that I saw you.
Okay? And so the bear says, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone.
Okay. So then what happens?
And he promises it. But when he goes home, then the whole scene changes. Because that is when the change happens. And his wife, he finds his wife waiting at the gate for him. And so she says, where did you go last night? Where did you sleep? Why didn't you come home earlier? So I can't tell you. I can't tell you anything.
Yeah, and this is a little joke in the story. Because husband, I'm not familiar with you have to tell me what you said.
And she says, yes. What do you mean? I'm your wife. You have to tell me. Where were you last night? And so then he's supposed to tell her that yes, I saw a bear and I was sleeping in the cave with the bear. But I promised him that I'm not going to tell anyone because we don't want anyone to find him and kill him or whatever. But then again, think about it. And then they feel that they're missing a very good opportunity of making money. And they say he has a daughter, and he wants his daughter to study well, and he wants to get the best education, but he can't afford it. He's a poor farmer, and he used to just grow a few vegetables in his garden, and he didn't have much money. So, but he thought then go and tell the king we will get the reward, and we can do so much with his child and study well. So they decide to break his promise. And
okay, so that's the next decision that is made in the story. And as the story came to me, it was really the wife who insisted that he go and did it. But now I changed it, and I think in the written version it changed that together they decided. Yeah, because I did not want the wife to be the villain. I also added this element. I also added the element that they wanted the money so their daughter could go to a good school. That's sort of a modern element that I put in there. This is to make the betrayal a little softer.
Yes, it's actually a story of betrayal because he promised that the bear that he will not tell anyone, but then finally the need for money, came over, and so he goes to the king and he tells the king where this bear was. Where is it? And so the king sends the soldiers, they drag him out of the cave and down the mountainside, and they throw him in front of the king at the king's feet. And but then the bear stands up and on his four legs, 5 feet forefront or whatever, he stands up and he says, He said, you see, I am here only because I said it. So I did something for you. And if you are a good man, you will not do anything. You will not harm me. You will send me. You will save me.
Okay, so now the king has to make a decision.
Yes.
If you were the king, what would you do? Okay, so what does the king do?
But in this case, what happens is the king says, I have enough of brothers in my house. I don't need another one. So you may go. And so he releases the bear. The bear goes back.
And he says to the bear, I will not bother you. Nobody will bother you. So the bear ends up better than he started.
Earlier.
So the bear took a risk. At first it looked bad that he was going to lose his life, but then he got, he's going to live happily ever after.
And he did not go in hiding. He can live freely and happily because the king says, nobody is going to bother you after this. And you may go and sit the bear. So that is like a reward the bear got for helping this. Okay, so that was a reward that he got, and he did not expect to.
But there's one, yeah. No, I'm just saying there's one loose end. What about the man who found the bear? What happened to him?
What about the man who? So the man, what happens is he goes to the king and he tells the king, see, I did it for you. I did it for you. And so.
But the king says, I'm not sure if you did it for me. I think you did it for the reward.
So the king says, no, I don't think you did it for me. You did it for your own self. You needed the money and you did this because of that. And so I cannot give you the reward. But this man will keep on begging him. And then finally the king is sorry for him. And he says, okay, and the reward was 1 crore rupees. That was a huge reward that he had. So then finally he said, okay, I'll give you the reward. Because you did it for me, you say, and you brought help us to find the bear and bring it to me, and it was all for my sake. I'll give you the 1 crore reward. But at the same time, I'm going to fine you 1 crore for lying to the bear and for breaking promises. So that needed nothing.
What?
That's what
I did all this work, so now I want to know. Yeah, I did all this work and I get nothing? Oh, king, really, it's not fair. Please.
I did all this for you. So I need the money. Give the money to me. Then the king takes and then he feels sorry for him and says, okay, I'll give you the money. I'll give you the reward. I'll give you the 1 crore rupees that I promised. But at the same time, I'm going to fine you 1 crore for lying to the bear and for breaking your promise. So you need to be punished for that. So that's left without anything, he tells him. And then this man he's actually reduced to tears and starts sobbing and we need this money so badly. And then the king says, yes, I know that you need it for your daughter's education. You want her to get into the best schools. So I will help you. I will make all the arrangements to the best schools that we have here so she can get educated very well.
And learn the difference between right and wrong. Yes.
Learn the difference between right and wrong, just like me. Like I did now, just like me. She will get educated. She will know the difference between right and wrong. So the man is very happy and all lived happily after that.
Okay, so there's a series of real decisions that have to be made in here, and some decisions they make good decisions, some they make bad, but it's pretty, on some levels it's kind of realistic. Somehow these decisions are similar to decisions that we have to make in real life. But the actual story is all fantasy. I mean, a talking bear.
A talking bear is a part of the fairy tale.
Yes. But inside the story, the actual relationships and decisions have a certain reality to them.
And a lot of lessons to be learned from that. And it also shows the king being very magnanimous and letting them go. When actually he was always hunting these bears and taking the fur and making rugs and other things. But this time he said, why don't I have enough?
It's an example of how a personal appeal by the bear made the difference. Because the king became aware that this is a living being that has feelings, and then the king decided, I don't need any more rugs.
You may go and Nobody will bother you anymore. So that was the best part of it, I think so.
For you.
Nobody will bother you anymore. So now the bear can freely. And he doesn't have to hide. So that was a very, very good act of keeping what things does.
Okay, what story did you choose? Oh, hold on. We discussed it, I think, before you came, but we've made a recording of today's session. So I think there's one or two people who did not appear. Well, Derek was here for a while, and then he dropped out. And Seema is not. She couldn't, or she sent a message. Okay. So, so I hope that this session has raised awareness of the, the timelessness of these types of stories, in that they relate to universal matters of the personality and matters of social interaction. So even though on the surface they seem to be fantasy or long ago and far away, they speak to ever-present questions of how to live. So now we have had a week to think about this type of story, this kind of fantasy story. Last week it was epics, which is on one level historical stories or legends that are placed historically, but there's an element to them that is divine, so some people will contest if it actually happened historically, but those stories were serious stories because they relate to history and they relate to government in some cases. The week before that, we worked with life stories, including your life story. And as I've said, a goal in here is that you should be able to tell any story with the same sense of reality and taking it seriously that you told your life story. So so keep working on this. As I say, I really do recommend that, I would actually recommend that you write down a version of your life story. And if you send it to me, I'll keep it private, but I will send back to you ideas on metaphors that can be used to bring out certain elements of the story. As I think I've mentioned with these realistic stories, one way to develop the story is to use metaphors. Another way is to tell it as if it happened to somebody else, to project it onto a third person. There was a woman who did such and such. If you like, you don't have to write your life story. Write one episode from your life story. Just let's get started with transforming some personal story into a fantasy story. And if you like what you send to me, send it as third person. If you'd like to already make that step. And if you like, if a metaphorical set of metaphors comes to mind, please send that too. But I think it's a good idea to write this down and type it and send it, just because it'll really that way you'll really think about it. And as I say, I'll keep these things private unless you make a special note to discuss it with the group. But if you with the life story work, if you treat it like this is an article that they're writing in the Hindu about my life, the joys of my professional and intellectual interests, that is not so private anyway. That is something of you that you are here to celebrate. But I will keep it private until told otherwise. Okay, now next week it's going to be more on the style of performance, not the content. And I am going to send you, just in a few minutes, as soon as we hang up, links to a whole group of video recordings on YouTube, most of them recordings of a lady named Diane Ferlat, because she is an expert in using her voice in various ways to express emotion she's an artist with her voice. Yes, so one thing I want to find out right now before we hang up is if I play a video on my side, will it be seen and heard by you distant people? So I'm gonna do a share screen, and let's see. I'm gonna choose desktop, and now. People in distant places, do you see? I have a recording here of a lady, and now I'm going to play it. Hold on.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear her?
No.
Can't hear her.
Can't hear her. You can see her, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's see, if I unplug my headphone, what will happen? Now you can hear it from my computer, but distant people, can you hear her at all?
Yes.
She's not very loud.
You can hear it, but it breaks up a bit.
Breaks.
It's very soft. Okay, let me just try one thing. I'm going to get a speaker.
Did I see? He believed in it. He religiously got up early. He even a room in the hospital. To be, with his daughter. He and his wife. Every day they would get up in the morning, visit her, their daughter in the room, and sit beside the daughter and sing her favorite songs, talk to her the whole day, religiously. This went on, as I said, days and months and years. A year passed. Slowly, very slowly.
Is the sound,
But yet she
sound coming from my computer or your computer?
He did
Only
not
mine.
lose heart. He
Okay.
still felt, I can make any
Much better.
Now I'm putting the sound into a speaker.
after the doctor was bothering something.
Now, distant people, can you hear her?
He called the nurse. See, I think she's coming to see. She's coming out of the coma.
It's loud, but it's not clear.
It's not
the word-
clear.
Yeah, not clear.
Not clear. Okay. I will
Actually, it
work
got
on this,
better.
during the week, but I suggest you take a look in advance at some of the recordings I'm going to send.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to send
Okay.
links to the, let's come out of stop share. Yeah, I'll send the link in advance, and somehow we'll do it. Yeah, so that's it. So we're not working on any new stories for next week, but we're working on new ways of using the voice. And as I say, I will send notes and I will send links to these recordings. And next week we'll go over it, we'll practice it. I'll put you in breakout rooms together, and we'll really pay attention to the style of speaking. Okay, because there's two parts to this work. One is the content. I think we spent a lot of time discussing content, but now we have to also pay some attention to the stagecraft of using the voice and the body. Okay, so now I'm going to stop recording.